This is Sister, and we're reading Saturnastra Chalon. This is chapter 6. Shaking his head, Shaun said, "Let's just get this over with." Chalon walked across the stage, and he picked up one of the blonde rapiers. Chalon took his stance, and he prepared for battle. And what most duelists place their hands on their backs, or they outstretch their free hand. Chalon always dueled with his empty arm raised to the level of his heart, with a fist on his chest, and he then held his rapier straight ahead. Shaun started with some light jabs on Chalon's sword, and in response, Chalon took a couple of steps to walk back. This time, Shaun tried a more aggressive stance, but Chalon limited himself to putting some distance between himself and Shaun. And slowly, Chalon was luring Shaun to the curtains, and to go him further, Chalon returned with a similar-like aggression, but always retreating. And eventually, instead of parrying the blade, Chalon took a few steps sideways, and Chalon's dark rapier stabbed one of the column beams, and the force caused his blade to bend downwards. And this caused Shaun to lose his balance somewhat, and when he got within range, Chalon gave Shaun a backhanded slap on the face, and he would have done a fist, but Chalon was going easy on the guy. He knew that sparring with humans always entailed doing things without the intent to kill. And it seemed to Chalon that practice fights were superfluous. Indeed, they were for people such as us. For practice, we just learned the moves before trying them on bigger living targets that we could find, hoping for the best. And sometimes we would win, and at other times we would run away. And there is no shame in running away as long as you come back later to finish the job for good. And Shaun was somewhat stupefied by Chalon's backhanded slap to the face, and with his face pale, turning beet red, Shaun recovered his rapier, and he prepared to fight once again. And Chalon this time took a more aggressive approach, and Shaun was surprised at the force that Chalon applied each time he struck the blade. And it took all of Shaun's strength to hold on to the rapier, and as the fisting strikes like this, Chalon did a downward strike after evading a sharp end. And this one was aimed at the hand, and had Shaun's sword not have a hand guard, Chalon might have broken the thumb. And with his strike did force Shaun to lose his grip on his rapier. And it was after this that he said flatly, "Good training, thank you." A wry smile was Shaun's only response to this statement, and he returned the sheet of paper to Shaun, and Shaun neatly folded his request before putting it in his vest pocket. And paper was always a bit of a luxury, and as such, when a request were cleared, they were always put away for future usages. And after departing the stage, Shaun too looked up to the sky, and he noticed that it was noon, and there was still time for a couple of more requests before dinner. Time 15:06. The second request on the notice board belonged to Jay, and it read, "Super secret hush-hush mission for the brave of heart only." Chalon had read such a post before, and most folks tended to avoid any of Jay's weird requests. And Jay had a habit of biting more than he could chew, and Chalon usually helped them out when nobody else seemed willing to do so. And he walked a bit to the cooking fire, and eventually found Jay's trailer that he shared with his sister. And Kay was waiting outside for Chalon, and she took his hand and drew him nearer, and using her other hand, she whispered to Chalon's ear, "Turn back." Without giving any further explanation, Kay left Chalon to ponder on the mystery of her warning, and before he could decide, the door opened behind him, and he felt a strong hand of Jay on his shoulder, and with a gleaming smile on his perfectly brushed, crooked teeth, Jay said, "Chalon, you are just the man I was looking for." And Chalon was about to write a response, but Jay interrupted him by saying, "Come on, let's go, we haven't any time to waste." Chalon started following Jay back into town, and since Chalon had already been seen entering the town guards allowed him to enter quickly without doing the line again. And Jay visited the town quite often, so he was also a familiar face, and while he power walked behind Jay, Chalon tried to surmise where he was going. And he noticed that Jay was being quite deliberate with his thoughts, and there were about lines of this, "Chalon, I know you can read my mind, but if I let my body do the walking, you won't be able to get where I want us to go before it is too late. Just keep walking, don't think of anything. Was it to the left? No way. I remember those flowers. It was this way, I suppose. Where was I going again? And I could use a little bit of cinnamon, cookies and cream, and petals and mustard, white horse, green unicorns. I know you can read my mind." I know you can read my mind. Chalon by now was in a dour mood, and he was half tempted to abandoning Jay to his own devices, and based on previous observation, Chalon knew that Jay preferred frequented brothels, and if he was acting so suspicious, he probably wanted to visit an even shadier establishment, if that was even possible. Shaun stopped walking after he came to this conclusion, and Jay was already halfway down the block when he noticed that Chalon was walking back to camp. And Jay ran after him and said, "Where are you going?" Chalon wrote, "I am not in the mood to be your wingman." "Wingman? What are you talking about?" asked Jay, somewhat confused. "A wingman is a guy friend who helps you pick up ladies," explained Chalon. "I do not need help in that department." "No, I am not after ladies. I was just a little bit curious about a certain place and I wanted to check it out," said Jay somewhat evasively. "You want to see the workhouse," guessed Chalon. "Reading my mind again, I see. Can you guess what I'm thinking about now?" asked Jay. "No, I just guessed," that's how wrote Chalon on his board. "But don't you want to see what it is like?" insisted Jay. "I already know," wrote Chalon. "Do you now?" said Jay, incredulous. "Yes, and I am not interested," wrote Chalon. "Well, if you truly are familiar with the place, then more the reason for you to come with me," insisted Jay. Chalon did not bother to write a response. Instead, he started to walk away, and he was detained by Jay, who grabbed his shoulder and started yanking him towards the workhouse. And Chalon pressed his feet down, but was still dragged away, and eventually he found a post to which he could anchor himself, and using basic telekinesis, he wrote on his board, "Help!" And then he threw it to a passing guard on the other side of the road, and the board smacked the guard on the head, and it was a good thing he was wearing his helmet. A bit confused, he looked about till he saw Chalon and Jay across the street, and there was already a small group of children watching Jay making a scene, and while Chalon was rooted to the spot. And Jay in a harsh voice said, "You're making a scene, stop being such a baby and come with me." Chalon in response arced his free hand around the pole for a stronger grip, and the guard eventually said, "Hey you, what are you doing?" "Nothing, officer," said Jay. "I'm just taking my brother to the healer for his medication, but he's being a little bit difficult today." The guard looked at Chalon and then at Jay, and he noted that they were both not from around there. And the guard was new fool, and he knew that those traveling merchants tended to have their own healers. And the guard eventually whipped Jay's hand to force him to release Chalon, and looking sternly at Jay, he said, "Go on about your business, sir." "This has nothing to do with you, old man," remarked Jay. "Walk away." And using his telepathy, Chalon said to Jay, "No, you walk away, Jay, and this is the last time I will do anything for you." Since Jay had a pint of magic, he was not able to hear the thoughts Chalon had sent to him. Still, he could feel the malice festering inside Chalon, and in the end he decided not to push things any further. Jay left by himself, not giving a second glance to his adopted cousin. Chalon rubbed his shoulder till the pain went away, and then he arched it about a bit with his other hand till the rose noted the damage. And the douche had dislocated Chalon's shoulder, and despite his years, Jay had not changed much, and he always wanted people to do as he desired, even it was for this inflexibility that very few people bothered to even hear him out when he wanted something. Time, bro?
15 minutes.
And as for the helpful guard, he was indeed an old fellow, and his name was Robert Trimble, and he never knew his parents, and he was bought as a slave by La Imperia when he was 7, and during his time as a servant boy, his learning opportunities were limited, and when he turned 12, he was given his freedom, and he was made a page boy for a night. And from there he rose to the position of guard, which he kept till the ripe old age of 54. And Robert was not a man of much ambition, and he could have held a political office as an advisor for the court of society, but he always declined the position whenever it was offered. And despite not having an official office, he was often privately consulted on matters regarding the affairs of the state. His opinions were rarely radical, and often level-headed and well thought out, and at the moment he was the best paid guard in the city, and he lived in a small house facing the artificial forest of the pavilion, and he shared their home with his wife Clotilde and his youngest son Robbie. All of the other children had left long ago in search of greater opportunity, and for their ambitions they had all shared the same fate, and now Robbie was all that Robert had left. And Robbie was a mute like Chalon, and it was part of the reason why Robert had decided to intervene on Chalon's behalf. And while Chalon chose not to speak, Robbie could not could not even if he wanted to. And his parents had a genetic predisposition for muteness, and thus Robbie had won the bad lottery. And we had done our best to provide the best stock of genes for our local humans, but given enough time, bad mutations are bound to occur, and drinking and smoking also helps to produce such maladies. Anyhow, Robert handed Chalon his little chalkboard, and he rose his helmet to get a better look at the fellow, and the way Chalon was dressed reminded Robert of magic users he saw in the picture books. And still, most magical visitors that ever graced the pavilions of society wore normal people clothing. And it was for this reason he thought that Chalon was pretending to be a magic user to keep people away. And Chalon took his board and he scribbled the word "thank you." "No need, citizen. As an officer of the law, it is my duty to maintain the peace within the hold," said Robert, lowering his helmet before returning to his patrol. Guards in society acted like our police officer, and this left the knights free to hone their skills in the art of war. And it was enough that there was such separation within both holds, and both forces were usually fused into one. And this is society apart from other cities and holds and feudals. And when Chalon was finally left alone, he breathed a sigh of relief, and he ran back to camp in order to avoid running into Jay in the city. And when Kay saw him return to camp with a dour look, she grinned, and she came to walk beside him. "How did it go?" she asked. Chalon did not bother to write anything, and he came to stand before the notice board. And some of the other requests had already been addressed, and it was down to just a couple of fetch quests in the city and a simple escort mission. And before he could decide, Kay came out to the board and removed the fetch quest, and she started making her way towards the city. And it had been quite a slow afternoon indeed, and in just about a couple of hours it would be sunset. And he took the paper with the escort mission, and he made his way towards Jean's. And Jean was the oldest human member of the caravan, and she was 175 years old, but she looked like she was 70. The stock of humans in this world tend to last a little longer, and ever since the age of 5, she had always gone to temple once a week. And since she was starting to become enfeebled, she had decided that an escort was necessary for protection for whenever she visited the temple. Time, bro?
11 minutes.
Chalon found her inside her cozy little trailer, and she shared this trailer with Harold, and she was not related to him, but he always saw her like his grandmother, and she was respected and revered. Chalon knocked softly on the door, and he waited a moment before going inside. And Shaun was just about finishing dressing Jean, and he had tied the little bonnet and had fixed the spectacle on Jean's face. Jean's hair was short, of pure silver color, and she wore a lady attire with the petticoats, the laces, and the shawls. And to create the contrast with the dress, the buttons, brooches, and laces were yellow. The bonnet had an elegant ornament of silk rose, and it was so lifelike that many people believed that it was a real rose. And with some effort, Jean rose from her seat, supporting herself on her cane, and the handle of her cane was smooth, and beyond the handle it had an intricate carving made of silver, and it was 5 centimeters in length, and the carving featured a little gecko with his eyes fixed straight ahead and his mouth partway open as if ready to strike for a meal. And Chalon handed Jean his elbow, and she took it for added support, and slowly they made their way out of the trailer, and while he walked, Chalon pondered how long this walk was going to take. And after analyzing the walking speed of Lady Jean, he figured that it would take about an hour to make it to temple and another one for the return trip. This was assuming that nothing occurred to hamper their progress. As soon as they were out of camp, Lady Jean's bony hand clawed deeper into Chalon's sleeve, and she drew a little closer, and she started looking about at any unfamiliar face that passed by. And she flinched a little when a stray dog came a bit too close to sniff her dress. And in her younger years, she would have kicked the dog away, and now she had to force herself to ignore the curse to continue on her way. And Chalon did look at the stray, and he was compelled to move away from him. And now with his mind, no, dogs are pretty intuitive, and they can tell when they are not wanted. And by now the guards were just outside the main gate, and as before, Chalon skipped to the night, and the guy had already seen him come and go several times this morning, and since he had permission to enter, nobody bothered to question or delay his entry. And Robert, who was by the gate, commented to one of his mates as he saw Chalon pass by, "What a nice young man to be escorting his grandma to the temple." "And how can you tell they are going to temple?" asked the guard. "Most ladies her age only leave the comfort of their home when they are going to temple," explained Robert. "Is it because they fear their own mortality?" asked the guard. "Who knows? And I will tell you all get to that age, said Robert. If I am lucky, I will find the answer to my question myself, said the guard. Yes, if we are lucky. They feel like if you're lucky to make it to old age. Cause all of the wars and stuff is like very rare for like for like people from like the fighting clans and whatnot, and then I to like make it to old age. Chalon was quiet during this exchange, and Lady Jean did not say anything either, and while she was through the gate she breathed a sigh of relief, and after taking a couple of steps she said, "Give me some water, boy." Chalon produced a skin of water from his sleeve, and he acquired a little glass which he used to pour Lady Jean her water. Jean drank it with gusto, and then she said, "Let's continue." The pair walked a couple of minutes, and Lady Jean said, "Give me some water, boy." Chalon did as he asked once again, and she smiled after drinking her nice glass of cool water. A nearby urchin passed by and was inclined to take one of the shiny buttons, but he stopped when he noted the color of the dress, and he too was wearing white clothing, and in this world white was the color of mourning. And Lady Jean asked Chalon, "How goes your education?" "I don't go to school," wrote Chalon, and he held the board close to Jean's face so she could read it. Jean pushed the board aside and she said, "I am not blind. And you still have your tongue. Use your words, boy." Chalon shook his head to illustrate his desire not to use his words. Lady Jean then said more to herself, "What fancies of children today, and I would have imagined you would have outgrown such a stubborn streak by now. Or are you afraid?" "A little," wrote Chalon, and he erased his message after showing it to Lady Jean, and then he added, "But it has nothing to do with my mutism." After writing this, Lady Jean put a stop to her idle chatter for a bit, and her eyes lingered on the flowers adorning the sidewalk, and the sound of the horse stepping on the cobblestone were quite pleasing to her, and still she imagined that it was somewhat bothersome for people not to use them. And Chalon and Lady Jean observed a new resident drawing a wicker into the street to tone down the sound of the horses passing by, and at the sight of this pollution one of the guards came to the person to reprimand the fellow for ruining the aesthetics of the city. And there was not a local ordinance restricting such measures. Still, the guard lived nearby, and he specifically minded anything that he considered trash near his home. Lady Jean commented, "Not a rat inside." "They mainly come out at night," wrote Chalon on his board. "I'm not talking about the people, but the rodents," specified Lady Jean. "You're right," wrote Chalon, and he erased his messages and then wrote, "Rats are not the worst thing out there. Mosquitoes are even worse." "Mosquitoes, you say? You mean those little blood-sucking parasites," said Jean. Chalon nodded in response. "They are a bit of a nuisance, but nobody dies from a bit of itching," said Lady Jean. "Not anymore," sighed Chalon. And indeed, there was a big debate during the terraforming period of Saturnastra, and in the end it was decided not to include the vectors that mosquitoes normally transfer. Now, aside from a little blood loss, mosquitoes are nothing more than a nuisance, and I don't care that they help pollinate the blood bug orchids, and if you ask me, they should not have included them in the roster. And we can also do without the pesky honeybees, and there are plenty of other pollinators like bats, flies, butterflies that can pick up the slack. And after mentioning the mosquitoes, Lady Jean scratched the top of her gloved hand with her index finger, and this small motion took a bit of effort, and she nearly lost her balance, and for she had taken a step without her walking cane, and Chalon did serve her well as a strong physical support. Time, bro?
5 minutes.
Lady Jean sighed before continuing her walk, and there were times when she almost allowed herself to forget the years that weighed down on her, and the loss of energy had started 3 years ago, and she had been brave and spring chicken. But one day people around her started doing things for her, and the trigger had been the sudden death of Grimoire. And despite being 10 years younger than her, he had been done in by a simple fall, and the poor bastard had drowned in a pool of his own blood, and it had taken 2 hours to find his body. And ever since then, the people in the caravan had started to mind their elderly. And Lady Jean had never asked for help or special treatment, though after a while she got used to it, and eventually she grew to expect it. And when she walked, she saw a little blonde girl playing with a hoop and a stick, and she was chasing the hoop down all along the street, and her little game was drawn short when a fellow tripped over the hoop. I know the fellow got up and he went to give the girl a good thrashing. At least it was the intention that Chalon sensed from the man. And the girl, looking about to came to hide behind Lady Jean and Chalon. And bellowing, the man said, "You little imp girl, I am going to kill you." Lady Jean said flatly, "Murder is illegal last time I checked." "Move aside, Grandma," said the man, and he made a motion to push Lady Jean out of the way. And with a swiftness Lady Jean had forgotten she opened her walking cane and she sliced the man's hand. And her hidden sword was about 20 centimeters long, and it was light and woodly, and built like a razor, and it would not make a dent in an armor, but it could easily slice through flesh. The little girl grasped at the sight of so much blood, and due to the proximity, Lady Jean's white dress got splattered on the chest, skirt, and hat. And the man held his hand and wrist, and Shadow removed the ribbon from Lady Jean's bonnet, and he created a tourniquet for the man. Chalon opened his mouth to say something witty, but remembering his silent fancy, he chose not to say anything. And the man ran towards the nearest gross cleaner to get his hand mended, and Lady Jean had a content smile on her face, and turning to the girl, she patted her little head and said, "Run along now, you dear, and be careful where you choose to play." "I will, ma'am," said the girl, giving a curtsy before running away. The old woman held her cane in her hand, and then for the first time in a long time, she used only her 2 feet to walk forward, and she gave a hesitant step, then another, and soon she was at an even pace. And as soon as Chalon and Lady Jean turned a corner, the little girl from before started stalking them, and there was a mischievous look in her face. And slowly, little by little, her little mind worked. And it was then when she spotted an easier opportunity, and she let Chalon and Lady Jean go unharmed from her block. And the pair stopped a moment to tend to the messy situation. Time, bro?
2 minutes, 30 seconds.
Chalon acquired an identical hat for Jean, and as for the dress, he cleaned it as best he could. In the end, he placed a decorative overdress to hide the blood. And while he helped her, Lady Jean said, "You noticed her too?" Chalon nodded in response. "What a naughty little imp," said Lady Jean. Chalon said nothing, and he only nodded his head in agreement with her. And when this task done, the pair continued on their walk. And Lady Jean stopped a moment and pointed to the left and right. "Was it this way or that way?" Chalon shrugged his shoulders in response, and he wrote, "Which temple do you want to visit?" "I wish to visit the goddess of old age," said Lady Jean. "There are no temple for such a goddess," wrote Chalon. "It's there, but I went to it last week with Kay," said Lady Jean. Alright, so we're going to leave it here. Bye-bye, God bless.